Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to add my own thoughts to the ongoing scandal of dodgy PPE contracts, which was the vehicle that the government used to funnel public money into the pockets of friends and donors. And it'd be important to know why we aren't chasing up billions of pounds worth of fraud at any time. But when the government have just told ordinary families to pay even more in taxes, you would think it'd be somewhat of a necessity. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So let's look at where over 12 years of Tory government has got us. We are paying the highest rates of tax since just after the Second World War, and that was when the country faced a huge rebuilding project. Our public services are also in ruins. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find anything the Tories have actually invested in during their time in government. You know, seriously, what have they done? With Labour, you could point to new schools, new hospitals, social housing. What can we point at and say the Tories funded that? You know, even their new hospitals, which of course we're not getting. Stephen Barclay, the health secretary, tried to point at a hospital, go, oh, look, that one's new. And it's like, yeah, that was the one ordered by Labour. It took you an extra 12 years to build it. But it was put in place when Labour was still in power. No new hospitals from the Tories. So they're basically they're charging huge taxes, but they're not actually spending it on things that we used to have. You know, when we paid much lower levels of tax, people are quite reasonably asking, where's the money gone? Charging more, spending less, something's not adding up. Where's the money gone? Well, I could talk again about how if the government doesn't invest in public services and other infrastructure, then your economy suffers because that hurts businesses, your tax revenues go down, so you have to raise the rate of tax in order to maintain those revenues. But as it happens, quite a lot of money has just disappeared as well. The VIP lane is back in the news this week. This was how the government sacrificed countless British lives to make their mates a bit richer. Actually, a lot richer. At the start of the pandemic, we needed a load of medical equipment. Now, we were already short of PPE stockpiles thanks to Tory false economy. Before we ever knew about the pandemic, the government were told we do not have sufficient stockpiles. That was the previous year. And they went, no, too expensive, not doing that. So we needed to get a load in all of a sudden. Established producers told journalists that they were making PPE for health services around the world, but had received no orders from the NHS. The government tried to claim, well, it's difficult to source PPE right now because of the high demand. UK-based producers were saying to journalists that they would prioritise the NHS over other customers, but the government just weren't putting orders in. We found out much later what they were doing was putting out contracts themselves, with officials told to prioritise these so-called VIP lane. This was basically anyone who asked for a public contract and was close enough to a senior minister to get their name added. There were Tory councillors in there. People that they just went to the pub with were in there. You know, I mean, some might have been companies with a record in sourcing medical equipment as well and donated to the Tories to make sure that they were top of the list when it came to awarding contracts. That's just your common or garden corruption. But some of them were just random Herberts who had never so much as bought a packet of bandages in their lives before. Now they were being given tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of pounds to go online and order PPE from wherever they could get it, mostly China, and pocket a massive wodge of the cash for themselves. The government would excuse the high spend as being the result of global shortage of PPE brought on by the pandemic, so you know, inflation in the cost of it. But we found out about it all. They didn't want us to. They found out. The High Court confirmed that it was an unlawful way to proceed with PPE procurement. And now the scandal has blown up again, centred on Tory peer Michelle Mone, who had been particularly careless at covering her tracks. She was given, or at least her company was given, £20 million worth of public money in order to secure over £200 million worth of PPE. Now, in itself, that would be a fairly hefty cut. But the £200 million of PPE that her company sourced was basically useless. Now, she's tried to deny any involvement in the award of the contract to the company, PPE MedPro, one of those companies that didn't even exist in this country until the government set up the VIP lane. Oh, when round about May 2020, all of a sudden there was a load of new companies, all with the intention of sourcing PPE. It didn't exist before. The number of pretend companies that came into being at the exact same time is quite staggering. Michael Gove was recently asked about his role in awarding those contracts. He tried to say that he just passed on the details to the relevant officials, but we know this isn't true from the documents, including emails that were submitted to the High Court when legal action was taken against the government. And even, if you're going to try and say it was all above board, like just the fact you were giving loads of these contracts to companies that had only existed for a few days over companies that had been established for years. I mean, doesn't that tell you there's something up? Now, the issue's been raised in the House of Commons again this week by Labour leader, Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, whose main role is shining a spotlight on Tory sleaze. Frankly, this one transcends sleaze, given the sheer scale of it. It doesn't just represent an enormous amount of public money deliberately misappropriated to enrich friends and donors at a time when the government are pleading poverty. But because we didn't give out all the contracts to reliable suppliers of PPE, many people died or became ill with long COVID unnecessarily. Because that's what really needs more attention. The reason why this has blown up in the news this week, I suspect, is because of the budget. The government are saying, sorry, we've got this black hole in our finances, you need to plug it with more taxes. I think this is a way of saying to people, look, they threw away billions of pounds. Shouldn't they chase it up? Because that's what you should do. At the end of the day, we did not get the equipment we ordered. The government are in their legal right to reclaim that money because we didn't get what we ordered. But they're not doing that because they weren't bothered about the equipment. This was about enriching mates. But this is what needs more attention, the human cost. The VIP lane was not just a scam to steal from the public purse. That's what makes it particularly newsworthy right now in the shadow of the budget. But it deprived frontline health and social care workers of essential PPE as we were being overwhelmed by a pandemic that the government said we should take on the chin. This corruption killed people, a lot of people. It has meant a lot of frontline NHS staff suffering from long COVID. That has in turn meant that our NHS is even more understaffed now. That will also have led to needless deaths. And this issue has popped up in the news several times before, but it only ever seems to be The Guardian chasing it. The rest of the mainstream media just turning a blind eye. Oh, it's not really that important, is it? So much of the public completely unaware. This sort of thing should be scandal of the century. I would like to think that Labour will find a way of making more of the public aware of what has happened here. But no matter how successful they are in doing so, and it's going to be limited success without the media, I do hope that when they take office, they order a full arm's length, so nothing to do with them, full independent public inquiry into this VIP lane. And it's easy to do politically. They can say they want to learn lessons about procurement during a national emergency in order to inform government planning in the future. In order to say, the next time there's an emergency, we need to know what we're doing. So we're going to look at what you did during the emergency so that we can learn lessons. Because we still remain at risk from pandemics. But the findings would be dynamite and surely lead to criminal investigations later on. When it came up in Parliament, Brendan O'Hara of the SNP highlighted the fact that we're still spending about over £750,000 a day. Not that much, bloody hell, that would be a lot. It was £770,000 a day, he said, on storing the basically useless PPE bought with all these ill-advised contracts. So that's money down the drain still going on. That's tens of millions of pounds a year spent on PPE that we can't ever use, ever, because it's not suitable. Put a match to it all and save ourselves the continued expense. But despite the renewed pressure on this scandal from MPs, the mainstream media still largely ignore it. The Tories are probably going to lose the next general election anyway, but letting a large number of voters find out about this would be fatal to their reputation for many years to come. So what I want to see happen here, as I say, is for Labour in government to order a full public inquiry. The Tories will cry witch hunt, of course they will. But if it's a full independent and public inquiry, completely at arm's length, all Labour are doing is starting it off and then that's it. And the results are published publicly. They don't go through the government first. It's like, no, all be public. Then the government will have no role to play in its execution. So those complaints shouldn't really land. There are, of course, lots of public inquiries that the next Labour government could launch. Probably best not to, because you'd overwhelm the public. They might all drown each other out. Just pick one. The one of most public interest, the one which could be almost a metaphor for the Tories' entire time in government. Because look what they've done. They raided the public coffers at a time of major national emergency, whilst pretending they were doing so to help the people. With the proceeds of their crime safely tucked away, they then proceeded to tell the people that they failed, that they now needed to stump up extra money to pay for it all. It's quite simply grotesque. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.